the reason one of well several reasons, but one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on is not only because we've worked on stuff together in the past, but also I suspect, and correct me if I'm correct here,
Uh-huh.
that you are a weeb.
So, define weeb. Weeb is one who likes anime. Is that
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I've seen you mention Utena,
that
right?
is a
And
fact.
and I know you have some. So not just a wee, but I get a lot of nerdy vibes from you. So
100%.
I would just like to, before anything else, dive into that. Like,
Oh my gosh, let's do
what
it.
is your shit? Yeah, what are your most passionate things, nerd wise, I guess.
So, like, as far as Japan and Japanese culture, Japanese art, I grew up watching Pokemon,
Mm-hmm.
and I was
Yeah,
super into it. And Pokemon was like, as many of us probably, was like our gateway drug to other anime. And so
sure.
from Pokemon, I discovered what was available at my local Videoland to go rent on video cassette tape.
Nice.
And I ended up watching Slayers, and Utena
Yeah.
quickly became
Yep.
like my favorites. And Record of Lodoss War,
Mm.
Please Save My Earth, Pet Shop of Horrors. This was all also like my college anime club selection. Cowboy Bebop, of course, Trigun.
Yeah.
But Utena was the one that really captured. That's like my jam. I loved like the it's like an abstract painting in anime form. And I really love the motifs, the music, the symbolism, the kind of whole adolescence, that story of what does it mean to transition from adolescent to the world of adulthood. And
Yeah.
I just love that stuff. I also really love like Miyazaki and more like slice of life stuff. There's a huge place in my heart for Grave of the Fireflies.
Yep.
Just a devastating film. And so like my interest in Japanese anime made it so I wanted to study Japanese in college. And it was
Okay.
through studying Japanese. I went to Wellesley College just outside of Boston. They have a great Japanese department. And it was there where I discovered Takarazuka, which is an all-female Japanese musical theater. And then that
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
just became completely fascinated by, obsessed with, did my senior thesis on, ended up interning over there during
Oh, shit.
college.
Okay.
And yeah, and I ended up studying abroad in Japan for about a year. And yeah. So like, but here's the thing. I don't often talk about anime because I feel like I went through a period where I was very current and updated on it. And then there's a whole like 15-year, 20-year stretch of time, honestly, where I don't watch the stuff that most people watch and that's popular. I kind of, some things pop out to me I end up finding, or they find me. I also love rewatching some of the older stuff I used to watch. So I'm an anime fan, but I'm afraid to claim it. In the same way that like I am a gamer, but I play games that I played like on an IBM in 1995.
Okay.
And so it's like I'm a hipster that way, I guess.
Well, I would say there should be no fear in your heart. If
you.
if you love anime, then you are an anime fan. I think there's no need for fear. I'm not here to go. Oh, are you really? No, clearly, just listing the titles you listed, I'm like, okay, yeah, no, this shit's legit. Now, what's the most recent? Do you watch anything recent, or because I know some people who were big into anime like way back in the day, and then they kind of fell off of it. And then, do you keep up with it at all? Like, have you seen anything recently, or
I will.
That's more of the past?
Yeah, I will say, like, the stuff that tends to grab me now is kind of slice of life stuff. Like, a few years ago, gosh, this came out probably almost 10 years ago, but there was a movie called Colorful.
Oh yeah.
That Hulu recommended it to me, I think, and I watched
Right.
it, and I was like, yes, this is incredible. And then I watched Agretsuko. That's really fun because I'm also a huge heavy metal fan. And so metal and, a Japanese woman trying to figure out how her work and love life is going to happen through heavy metal. Like, yes, sign me up. And then more recently, this isn't anime, but it's a Chinese animated series, called Heaven Official's Blessing that I have become obsessed with.
Is this the one I'm thinking of? I know there's a couple Chinese shows that have been very popular. Okay, yes, I do know of this. Okay. And you're very into this one.
Currently, as of like April. So it released on Netflix in April. I put it on in the background because I thought it was pretty. And then after 3 or 4 episodes, I started paying attention to it. And I'm like, wait, what? I gotta go back and watch this properly. And then I became obsessed. And then I read the novel that it's based on, 5 books. I'm not a reader. It's been a long time since I read a book. I read 5 books over the course of 3 days.
Whoa.
I am obsessed. It's a beautiful story.
Okay, and if you what is like the pitch? If you had to pitch it to me, the TLDR, like what?
Okay, so
or go long. Like, I mean, it's as much as you want to talk about it. Like, I love hearing what people are passionate about. So sell it to me. What draws you to this?
At its core, Heaven Official's Blessing is a romantic story about a thrice ascended god. It's set in this Chinese fantasy feudal world, and there's this god named Xilian who has just had a rough time of things, and every time he ascends to become a god, for some reason, he gets demoted back down to earth. And as a result, he doesn't end up becoming bitter, but he's become a man of the people. He wants to save the common people. That's kind of always been his philosophy in life. And he's just the most good-natured, almost enlightened god you could hope to meet. So the 3rd time he ascends, that's where this story picks up. And a very interesting group of characters starts to get interested in his ascension and sends him out on... It's almost like a Monster of the Week sort of detective noir, like film noir story almost, where there's some kind of mission, some kind of mystery he has to solve, and he's so uniquely positioned to solve it. And he often has the help of a mysterious ghost king who starts hanging around him for unknown reasons that unfold as the story goes on. And without giving too much away, it's a romance. It's a beautiful love story, and it unfolds slowly. It's a slow burn. And I'm also so fascinated too because the central romance is between 2 men. I'm so fascinated how censorship laws work in China. And right now, danmei, it's called, I think, or boys love, male and male homoerotic relationships, is a hugely popular genre in novels, comics, and animation. But there's certain things they can or cannot show to get around the censorship laws in China. So it's just been really fascinating, not only from a story point of view to get into this show, but like just learning about some cultural things I didn't know. Frankly, I didn't know much about China or Chinese culture.
What's an example of one of those like sort of workarounds they have to
Okay, so this novel series, Heaven Official's Blessing, I'm not going to say the Chinese title because I'm going to butcher it, but this author who wrote it also has several other novels that are wildly popular. One of them was adapted and became the show called The Untamed, which is a huge international hit, and it's on Netflix. And that show, it's my understanding that the central gay relationship, they made it so like, oh, they're sworn brothers and soulmates, but they never kiss, they never touch romantically. Everything is communicated through looks and through music and through this understanding of, yes, we are soulmates, but we're totally platonic. Which is wild to me, which is why the animated series have a bit more freedom, I think. And there's so much more you can express, I think, in an animated series that can be read into as ambiguous, but also leave no room to allow you to think this is anything other than a romance. There's just something, especially, a lot of it's my understanding a lot of Chinese animated series are heavily influenced by Japanese anime. And so some of those conventions that are present in anime that very, very much clue you into the relationship are really well utilized. So I just think it's so fascinating.
It's one of those things where you're like, they are absolutely lovers. And you know what? You don't need to show them necessarily doing purely only physical things to show that. I like that. Okay.
It's almost like a Jane Austen novel. Like, you know how Pride and Prejudice is so full of romantic tension without being sexually explicit? I love stuff like that.
Yeah, and for me, like, it's interesting. I'm very unfamiliar with a lot of like donghua, like, you know, sort of stuff. Like I know there's one. Do you know Mo Dao Zushi? Have you ever heard of that one?
That's The Untamed. That's what I was talking about. So
that's
the author,
The Untamed. Oh,
yes,
okay.
The author who wrote
Gotcha.
that book wrote Heaven Official's Blessing. So yes.
Oh, okay. So same author.
Yes.
Oh, okay. I see. Yeah, no, I've heard great things about this one, and okay, yeah. No, I should check these out. And you say you don't keep up with anime, but you're watching the adjacent, basically the same thing.
Yes, I'm expanding, you know, going into other Asian media. No, I mean,
Sure.
Agretsuko probably is the most recent Japanese anime I've watched. I did a rewatch of Utena during the pandemic. That was excellent. It's incredible. It still holds up.
I definitely need to watch Utena. That's
Have you never seen it?
no, I haven't.
Oh.
It's absolutely on my to watch list though. There's just too much anime, and I've been through the pandemic, and we were kind of like watching, and I was kind of doing catch up on older shows because I tend to not watch a lot of new stuff. Like I have friends who watch a lot of new stuff, like all the new stuff. I'll pick and choose if I watch stuff, and I'll go for what I really want to watch.
What are some of your favorites that you watch to unwind or?
My favorite one is people listening to the podcast are like, here he goes again. Chihaya Furu. I don't know if you've heard of this one. Chihaya Furu.
Oh, Chihaya Furu. Okay.
Yeah, it's about. Are you familiar with Karuta?
No.
Karuta is a poetry, almost like card game sport that is played in Japan, and it's about basically hitting. Like a person will read a verse, and then the two players have to hit with their hand the card that is like the second verse of that as quickly as possible.
Oh, cool.
And it is fantastic. I have talked about it ad nauseum on the podcast and have introduced it to many people. It has never failed. If you are ever in the mood to watch an anime,
Yes.
watch Chihaya Furu. It's fantastic. I just watched I've seen the first 3 episodes so many times, and I never get tired of it because it's like the best introduction to people. Like literally, I think yesterday. Yep, yesterday, another friend was like, "All right, let's you talk about this show all the time. Let's see it." And we watched the first 3, and they're like, "Yeah, no, I get it."
Oh my gosh, I gotta check this out.
It is endearing and wonderful characters. Yeah, I highly recommend it. So.
Oh, you know, now that you mention it, I just remembered I went through a big, and this is old now too, but like I went through a huge Nana phase where I loved.
Oh, I love Nana.
Oh, I love it so much.
Anime or manga, both?
Yes. I watched the anime first, and then I went and read the manga, and yeah. Have you read the manga?
I haven't read it. No,
Okay.
I watched all the show, and then I think my wife read past, but I didn't read it. But
The manga goes places, and
I heard from her reactions.
yeah. But that's cool. Okay, Chihaya Furu. It's on my list.
If you do watch it, I would genuinely love to know what your thoughts are. Like, let me know.
For sure.
Because you know, some people they like, what? No, poetry cards, like what the hell? But I'm like, no. Watch it.
No, that sounds
You'll
incredible.
get it. But I don't think I need to convince you. I mean, for someone who you were obsessed with Takarazuka, like, I mean, you get it.
Yeah.
You understand, like, yeah. kind of, it reminds me. Do you know Abby Trott?
Yes.
Yeah. So your sort of interest in Takarazuka reminds me. I don't know if you're familiar with her experience in Japan. Do you know about that?
No, not too much. I just know that she's an incredible baker, and I want to eat everything she posts on Instagram.
Well, she is plays the shakuhachi, if you know what that is.
What? She plays shakuhachi?
Yeah.
Abby Trott.
Yeah. And so, like, reminds me of your experience, which I would love to hear about with.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I'll have to.
So,
I'll have to connect with her about all that because I want to. That sounds fascinating.
So, tell me about your experience. In Japan.
Yeah, well, my sophomore year of college, I took a Japanese theater seminar at Wellesley, and that was where I was first introduced to Takarazuka. I read Jennifer Robertson's book about Takarazuka, which is kind of a prolific book for Japanese pop culture researchers. And I became fascinated. And this was in 2003. So on basic YouTube at that point in time, I looked up every Takarazuka video I could find. And the very first things I found were snippets from their production of The Rose of Versailles, which I then later came to know was an adaptation of the 1970s manga, shoujo manga, Beru Sayonobara. And so The Rose of Versailles is so interesting because it started off as a manga. It was adapted into an anime. And at the same time, it was adapted by Takarazuka into a stage show. And Takarazuka, for those listening who aren't familiar, it's an all-female actors theater company. And it was founded in 1912 as a way to bring visitors to the end of the Hankyu Railway line, the Takarazuka line, because there were hot springs there. And the founder of the theater company thought, hey, if we have this performance, these young, virginal, beautiful women, performing these beautiful, sexless, very wholesome, very pure musical shows, will attract visitors to the end of the railway line. And so that kind of grew and grew and grew. It kind of became, as most things in Japan, a vehicle for World War II era propaganda. And then after Japan was defeated, the theater kind of went dormant for several years. And it wasn't really until the early 1970s, with their adaptation of The Rose of Versailles, that the theater had this incredible resurgence that has not stopped. And they're right now the top grossing theater company in Japan. They boast that every day somewhere in Japan, there's a Takarazuka performance happening. And it's true. It's true. At their main theater, they do, like 11 or 12 shows a week. Only taking one day off and having multiple shows on other days. And they called it, in fact, the Berubara boom, the Beru Sayonobara boom.
Yeah.
And so it was such a hugely important musical and story to this theater company that over the years they've done all these different revivals of it, different adaptations. So I became obsessed with the idea of translating The Rose of Versailles into English and then staging it at my college, Wellesley, which is an all-women's college. I thought it was sort of a perfect marriage and a perfect thing for our theater department to do. So that's kind of what I set out to do. I did an internship one summer at a TV station in Japan just to get some experience. And I was always that first summer I spent in Japan, pretty much every chance I could, I would be at the Takarazuka Theater watching a show. I spent so much money. My poor father, I would call him and he'd be like, oh, I haven't heard from you in a while. Yes, Dad, could you please wire me more money because I need to go see this show? Oh, thank you, Dad. But I spent my entire stipend I received that summer on going to see Takarazuka, purchasing like scripts and musical scores from the bookshop.
Yeah.
And when I came back, I then came back to do half my junior year at Wellesley and then spent the rest of the junior year and summer in Japan studying Japanese. And then I got an internship at Takarazuka in part thanks to the help of various professors and people I knew. It was awesome.
Sure.
I had so much. It's such a rare thing for a foreigner to enter that space. They're very, very private, and with good reason. Part of the marketability of the company is this: they're creating a dream world that you can go into their audience to escape into. So they're very private about the private lives of their performers. And I felt very, very, very grateful to be allowed into the fold, so to speak, as a foreigner. And as a foreign student, I think the thing about Japan that really struck me, I was 18 and 19 when I spent the majority of my time there, and they are so welcoming to young people and students. Like if you go there with sort of the heart of a cultural exchange, truly wanting to understand the culture in order to educate others about it, to see it through an Eastern lens rather than imposing American Western views on it, doors open for you like you wouldn't believe. And so I consider Japan as a country to be one of the great loves of my life, and it's hugely in part to my experience there, working in the theater. And so I spent the summer there working at Takarazuka, got to watch a bunch of rehearsals and see all the different aspects of how they put together these elaborate shows. And I came back for my senior year of college to translate The Rose of Versailles, adapt it, because I had a few different versions I was translating, and then stage and direct it for my senior thesis. And then I went to sleep for the rest of the summer because I was dead.
But you did do it.
I did do it. Yes, yes.
That's fucking awesome.
Yeah,
oh
it was good times.
Do you have any specific memories from that experience that really stand out to you, or?
Yeah, gosh, so much of it was as a director. Well, the thing I found out I loved most was translating the music. There's something so interesting about how do you preserve the musicality of the original language without completely changing the meaning? And I found that to be a really fun puzzle. I'm trying to think of a specific example, but it's like, how do you preserve a rhyme? Because a certain rhyme will feel right with the music, with the chord progression. But that rhyme might not exist in your language. So, or if it does exist, it might be a really awkward phrasing. So what do you sacrifice versus what do you really push? I was, thankfully I had so much autonomy. I could basically do whatever I wanted. I think what was beneficial then when I had the whole thing translated, the music ready to go, I think what was helpful was then to work with my choreographer, my, music director, my stage managers to say, hey, these are the things I want to execute because culturally they're important. These things culturally make it Takarazuka. Like there needs to be a grand staircase at the end that everyone comes down, or it's not Takarazuka. How do we make this happen? And kind of that cross-cultural exchange of what makes sense in our Western artistic lens versus what is a new idea, but how can we say, okay, this may seem campy in the West, but how can we be as serious as we can about it? Because like what works and what doesn't? What is truly the Japanese-ness of it that needs to be in play versus what can bend? I don't know. Gosh, I haven't thought this much in depth about it in 20 years.
This is what I like to hear. No, I love hearing about this sort of thing. It's interesting you brought up sort of what do you sacrifice, right? And that's a lot of people have. There's a lot of discourse about localization,
right?
About do you some people want just absolutely rigid direct translation, and then there's people, but no, do you want to preserve? You don't need to have an exact. First off, it sounds robotic, right? If it's just completely literal, right? And it's in order to convey something that isn't necessarily in English, but make it flow nicely or make sense. There have it's interesting seeing people's different perspectives on it. And
Absolutely.
that's something that you had to do with a whole musical. I mean, it's pretty impressive. And in the end, was it everything you had hoped it would be?
It was for, 19, 20-year-old me. It certainly was. I'm sure if I were to look back at the video now, I would cringe. But at that time, yes, it was. I remember feeling very satisfied. And even though I knew, my major was in Japanese language and literature, and I've had people and a little voice inside me at times over the years question, well, what was the practicality of that? And to that I say, I learned so much doing that one project than I would have had I majored in something more quote unquote marketable. And at the end of the day, none of that has hurt me. As an actor, nobody cares what your major was.
Exactly.
So It's all worked out well for Zarafuzzle. It's cool. But at the time, I remember thinking, don't worry about whether or not this is going to translate into a long-term, like, this is your resume you submit and then you get your job out of college. Like, don't worry about that. What you've built in this time, whether it was going to another country to live, figure out life, and do research, the cross-cultural exchange of that, whether it was coming back and doing the actual literal translation work, doing the musical work, directing, working with a crew, essentially being a project manager, all these different things are skills that are applicable in every job. And so I think at the end of the day, I was very, very happy with how it all turned out. For a time, I really seriously considered moving to Japan and actually trying to become a director at Takarazuka. It was something that crossed my mind over and over the course of many years. And sometimes I wonder, what if I had been more bold right after college and said, you know what, I'm going to move to Japan and make this happen somehow. I don't know. I wouldn't have the life I have now, though, probably. So
thing is, a lot. I do believe that despite many what ifs in people's lives, it's you're kind of where you're supposed to be. I think that's what I genuinely feel. And I do want to interrupt and be like, I love hearing this, because for me, something that I think is very important to me is the remembering that not everything has to be tied to your career, right? In order for it to be inherently valuable. Like I think it's very important to, have passions and goals and things outside of just, oh, but what will it get me, like, job wise, or and then not only that, but like you said, like, so much of that experience will still translate into like skills for your career. Like everything in your life, I think, can be productive in some way, and even if it isn't necessarily like concrete, it's still the fact just doing something for the love of doing it. I think is an underrated, a lot of people are very just single-mindedly career driven, and I think it's important that to take time to just, no, I want to do this because it's fun or it's fulfilling.
I couldn't agree more, because if there's something in you that you feel compelled to get out, especially as an artist, especially as a creative person, you gotta find a way to get it out. Otherwise, it's going to eat you up on the inside. And if you don't get it out, you're robbing yourself of an experience that intuitively your life told you needed to have. So yeah, do what you want and don't worry so much about the results all the time.
I agree. I'm going to ask you, I have something to ask you, but before I don't want to forget. Now, I haven't seen this show, so I can't guarantee it's good. But it looks good, and it's a new anime. Are you familiar with this new anime that is directly about Takarazuka?
No. What?
Oh,
what? I don't know that I've heard about this.
I was just like, it's kind of funny. Like, you bring it up, and there is an anime right now called Kageki Shoujo.
Kageki Shoujo. Oh, that's perfect.
It premiered this month, actually.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it is about. Is it specifically? Let me. I have not seen it, but I recently sat down with Anime's New News Network, and I was subjected to watch every trailer for the anime season.
Oh, cool.
Oh, cool, but so much of it was garbage.
Oh.
But one of the shows that stood out to me, and I was like, "Ooh, that looks good," was Kageki Shoujo. So, I have again no idea if it's any good, but it is about. Or I guess it's a troop similar to Takarazuka, but still in the same vein. So. Yeah,
I'll definitely have to check that out. I can tell you this. I looked just now at the like an image search, and one of the covers of the manga, the character is dressed up like Lady Oscar from The Rose of Versailles. So it's very, very clearly, if not literally, a Takarazuka homage, a fictional equivalent, perhaps. Oh, that's cool.
Sure.
I'll have to check that out.
So I was gonna ask then. So you studied Japanese and did all this, and then what was the step to voiceover from there?
It's interesting. So, you ask any two people how they got to be working in voiceover, and their story is so different. I love that. Something I love about our business. So my path to voiceover specifically actually started a little earlier. When I was a kid, I loved cartoons, loved the Disney Afternoon. That's what I grew up watching. And I would always watch the credits to see who made the shows with the voice talents of and, who the artists were. And I, began to notice a lot of the same actors working on a lot of the shows I watched, and I would have so much fun picking out their voices. Like, oh, that's Jim Cummings doing his tenor versus his more bass voice. And so I always knew that there were people who were the voices of these things, and I got really interested in drawing and comics. And in high school, I was thinking, I want to be an animator. I'm going to go to school, maybe study either animation or computer graphics, visual effects. My parents were like, why don't you go into visual effects? Because that seems like it's a thing that's going to be a big money-making thing. And Asian parents, so.
Right. Yeah. No, I know. Yeah.
So I was really deeply obsessed with the Disney show Gargoyles. And every year they would have a convention at that time called the Gathering of the Gargoyles, where they would choose a different city, and the creator of the show, Greg Weisman, would be there, usually with other people who worked on the show, different artists, actors, animators, all, writers. And so for my high school graduation present, my dad took me to the Gathering in Los Angeles, and I had the opportunity to audition. They were doing a radio play at the convention where they they took a script from the show Gargoyles and they cast it with some of the voice actors who were at the con, and then they cast fans. And so I was 16 and I read for Greg Weisman, and I ended up getting cast as Elisa Maza, the lead female role.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And it was incredible. A really fun time performing for the convention. And at the end of the con, Greg said to me, you're going to college now. That's great. When you graduate, you should really consider moving to LA, because I think you could have a career doing this. And so I filed that away in the back of my head, and what a gift to be given that encouragement as a teenager.
That is, did you have a lot of acting experience before that, or
at that point I had done a ton of speech and debate all through middle school and high school, and a bunch of the school play, school musical. It was very clear that I loved performance, but I never, at that point, I didn't think that I could be a star. I didn't
right.
I thought it was so impossible. I thought there was no money in it, and only the very, very few could make it like that. And it's so interesting thinking about how your culture that you're raised in plays into that too, because my parents were from Pakistan and India, and even though my father's side of the family has very successful people working in the Indian film industry, I still didn't necessarily feel encouraged to go in the entertainment business in that way.
Sure.
At that point. So I went to college. It was like, I'm going to study media arts and like, get into, do this so I can go to like a good grad school program. And
Yep.
then I very quickly fell in love with the theater department and the Japanese department. And then that was kind of that. And so my whole goal in college then shifted, especially after studying with Takarazuka, was like shifting more towards, okay, I want to work in the theater. I want to be on Broadway. Maybe even direct.
And were your parents supportive of that during that period?
Yes, my father was, I remember, I didn't tell him, the whole plan was, okay, I'm going to double major in Japanese and media arts, which was Wellesley's kind of fusion degree of the arts and the computer science department. And I didn't spring on my dad till like the night before graduation, like, oh, Dad, you know how I was going to be a double major? I'm actually just majoring in Japanese, but it's with honors. Love ya.
Yeah.
So I think there was a little bit of certainly disappointment, but at the same time, I never felt discouraged from going after what I wanted. As long as I think there was the attitude, as long as you can be financially independent, and pursue things wisely, go for it.
Yeah.
But there were hints of like, maybe you should get an MBA.
Oh no, yeah. For me, it was like, have you thought about graduate school? Like,
yeah,
right,
yeah.
No. First of all, that's incredible. I mean, just getting to hear from who I assume or not assume must have been one of your heroes, like Greg Weisman,
Yes.
right? Like,
yes,
that. Hey, like, you should move to LA and do voiceover. I mean, that's a big fucking deal.
It was a huge deal. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
something that was like kind of in the back of my mind as I was doing theater. And, I applied after college, I applied to a few graduate programs for theater. I didn't end up getting into the schools I wanted to go to. And just ended up doing theater on the East Coast for a few years. But it was always in the back of my head, like, oh, you know what? I could work in animation. I could move to LA. I could be in cartoons. Wouldn't that be awesome? That's something I could do if I made the move. And it took me a few years to kind of really get up the courage to make that move.
Sure.
But in retrospect, like I have spent several years getting training in theater in DC. I was in a show all the time. I was in every imaginable genre of show. I did children's theater, I did musical theater, I did straight plays, I did Georgian movement dance shows. I feel like those years were kind of my do-it-yourself grad school for performance. Yeah. And by the time I moved out to LA a few years later, I was very focused in what I wanted to do. I was like, okay, I want to focus on camera television opportunities, and I want to focus on animation. And Greg Weisman is incredible. He was, over the years, I would see him occasionally at conventions, and he was such an incredible mentor. Any question I had about the industry, he would answer. Occasionally, he would send me over an audition opportunity. And so it was a relationship that I kept up. So when I moved to LA, it was I felt like I had a good network of folks out here who were kind of on my side, looking out for me. And when I moved out here, I also it's very quickly in retrospect, but it was really like 9 months before I kind of made my inroads. Because you got to figure out where am I gonna go grocery shopping? Who's my new dentist? Where am I gonna like get my car fixed? All the things of life when you relocate. But I ended up meeting the folks at North Hollywood Sound, who are now Dave and Dave, and they were so essential they were like my first voiceover home in Los Angeles. And I was amazed at how accessible people were. Some of the older folks who've been doing this for a long time, very generously did the thing with me that I hate when people ask me now, like, can I get you a coffee and pick your brain about things?
Sure.
But I'm so grateful to the folks who tolerated that from me. And, it wasn't very long before I felt like the engine of my voiceover machine was churning in LA. Yeah.
And that was like, when did you move out here?
That was 2012.
Okay.
Yeah.
How do your parents feel about your job now?
Well, they're no longer with us, but I think they'd be pretty proud. No, it's okay.
Gotcha.
That's okay. That's the blessing that I have, is that I've never, as much as they were worried about me, I've never once questioned whether or not they would have wanted me to go for this or not. Like I know the answer is yes. And I know, I think I'm people often say you're very confident to me. And I am. I'm deeply confident about myself and my abilities because I was raised by a group of adults who made me feel safe in my own potential to grow, and that's every day I try not to take that for granted, and I try to be that adult for young people in my life now, because to have that encouragement at a young age, especially when you're figuring it out in adolescence, like that's everything. That's so foundational. Yeah. Right.
Yeah, I mean, I've had a lot of people on who are, the children of immigrants, as I am, right? And it's this thing of especially Asian. I've talked to Asian actors, Asian parents, and there was always this understanding of like, even if our parents were like, oh, we just want have you thought about this? Have you thought about this? But it was always from, they just wanted us to be secure and happy, right? Like you could never, I could never take it too personally, and I've shared this sentiment with so many other people of like, because they worked so hard for us to to move to a new country,
right?
And struggle, and they just wanted us to be have a good life. So
right.
Whenever I hear, I meet another person like Asian parents, but we're also like, but they without them, it's like, what could we have done, right?
Right.
I'm always very 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 thankful as well. I was also in a fortunate position where my parents were very supportive of me as well. So
yeah, that's incredible. And I feel like the stereotype is that, Asian parents are unsupportive of their children going into the arts. And, there's certainly folks where that is the case. Yeah. But I really feel that that's an unfair stereotype, and certainly one that's hopefully changing. But I also can't help but wonder, you're talking to another success story, an Asian artist success story. So is it, are we able to become success stories because we had parents who bucked the norm, who bucked the stereotype? I don't know.
It's an interesting question, but I think for me, bottom line, it was because I know plenty of my friends who did not have great parents growing up, right? So I think transcending even just the Asian parents thing, like just having supportive parents, I think in general was a big blessing for me, and I'm sure for you as well. But yeah, no, I am very glad to hear. I love hearing about people's different sort of journeys into how they got into it. I did not know the whole Greg Weisman thing. That is,
so there's a fun kind of button to that story. In 2017, I moved here in 2012. I got my first agent in 2013, started auditioning regularly, primarily worked in commercial first, and then with an animated booking here and there. But it wasn't until beginning of 2017 where I booked 3 major shows all within a couple weeks of each other, and that really kind of got my animation career rolling. And I remember I got a phone call from my agent at the time who said, "How do you know Greg Weisman?" And I'm like, what? Why? And she was like, because we just got a direct offer for you for season 3 of Young Justice. And so 16 years after I'd first met Greg as a 16-year-old kid, we finally had the opportunity to work together. And that show ended up, and it continues because I still work on it, to be one of the most rewarding creative experiences I've had. I have one main character that I play on it, but I ended up, because animation is the way it is, and they can have us for 3 voices, and the cast is very, very big in Young Justice. So I ended up voicing like 10 characters on that season. And it was such an incredible creative challenge and creative gift, and all the more special that I could work with my mentor, with the man who had encouraged me from the very beginning. And so it was a really cool kind of full circle moment for me.
That is fantastic. I love hearing these kinds of stories. Now, I like to give the guest an opportunity. If you'd like, is there a question for me you would like to ask, or a topic you would like to bring up?
Oh gosh, so many.
If not, don't worry about it. But,
you're such a fascinating person. I feel like I could stay and talk to you for another hour where I just interview you about your life.
I mean, if you genuinely want to ask any, I don't give a shit. Yeah, whatever you like,
Something I want to know about you because you tweet about it a bit. You love games, like board games, right?
Oh, yes.
Okay, top 3. If you were to have folks over now to play with, your nearest and dearest, what 3 games would you want to play?
That's a tough question because without giving a boring, like too long answer, it's like it's always going to depend on how many people, right? How many people, who's there. But let's say it's the perfect 4 people, and they're all down to play anything.
Yes,
because 4 players is usually like what you want, the sweet spot.
Yes, totally.
Ooh. Okay. That's, I mean, if the question was just what are my favorite games, I know that answer, but my problem is I am constantly seeking out new games. So my wife will complain like, can we just play a game that we have? And I'm like, and we have like this giant shelf like of games, and I'm like, yeah, but I got all these. I got like 20 games. I got like we want to play. We gotta play them, right? Like there's this goal of mine which I'm very close to. Which I don't know, how familiar are you with board games, if at all?
I mean, I'm not like, I don't follow like the new stuff, but there's some like classics that my family busts out, or like game nights. Okay, like Settlers of Catan is probably my all-time fave.
Sure.
And like I love all the expansions and stuff. And then this isn't a board game, but like I really love a good werewolves session.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Where you just lie to people and kill people.
Absolutely a tabletop game. Yeah. So to answer your question, 4 players, or I don't know, like I was gonna say, like there's a website called Board Game Geek.
Okay.
Which it's like every single board game, like and I'm not exaggerating, is on the website cataloged. There are reviews like ranked. They are all ranked. Every board game ever made. So if you go to that website and type in any board game, you can see what it is ranked based off user reviews. And a goal of mine is to play the top 100.
Wow.
And I have played, as I'm literally looking it up right now, and it changes too, because as new games come out, sometimes they pierce the top 100. But I think I have about 10 left. 10
out of that
games
100 list.
Out of the 100.
Wow.
And I guess I'm literally looking at a number right now. Can you guess how many board games I have played in my life? Because I know, because I ranked them
in your
all.
life?
Yeah, in my life. How many board games do you think I have played?
I'm going to say at least 500.
More than that.
1,000?
Close, but 854.
Wow.
854 games. So it's like, if I'm asked that question of
the
three, it's tough, because I would say it would be there are games that I've been wanting to play. So that might be my answer, because I'll always have time to like pull out certain games, like if I need to. Like one of my favorite games of all time is a game called Marvel Legendary, which is a cooperative deck building game I don't know if you're familiar with deck building.
Yeah,
not like
yeah.
not like Magic the Gathering, but it's like everyone starts with nothing, and then you use your cards to buy new cards from a store,
okay.
and then you build your deck as you go. It's a very fun genre of game. It's my absolute favorite genre.
Cool.
Where it gives you the feeling of like, building up a deck, but it's always unique and it's always your own, and it's just for that game only.
Right. You don't have to worry about, do I have a good strategic deck to take into my
Exactly.
argument? Yeah. Like debate team.
Yeah, everyone is basically starting from nothing, and you're just building up, and you're seeing like, ooh, what can I build from what comes in the store? Like, if you're familiar with the game Slay the Spire, it's a very popular video
Slay
game.
the Spire. Okay.
It's a very good game, and that's the same sort of genre. But there are also these games called legacy games. I don't know if you're familiar with those. They are basically campaign games. Like, you play them over a long period of time, like 10 or plus sessions. The decisions you make are permanent. You like rip up cards and put stickers on the board, like for decisions. It's like it's meant to be played through. Like once you're done with the game, you're done, right?
Yeah.
But you play it through. So there are like a couple games I've been dying to break out. Like there's a game called Pandemic
I've
Legacy.
heard of that.
So Pandemic Legacy is the story version of that, where every
Right.
game you play, depending on how the game went, it changes the board, it changes the game, and you keep those changes as permanent. And I played the first season, and the second season is one I've been dying to pull out.
I find it so charming that you want to play a legacy game about a pandemic during a pandemic. It's like a little escapism.
It feels heroic in a way. It's like, because it's about squashing the diseases, and it is a weird feeling of
Yes, take control.
Yeah, take control. That's one of them. Clank Legacy is another one, and there's the Big Daddy Gloomhaven is a very, very big, gigantic box of a game. Haven't been able to play for over like a year because of the pandemic and such. So
because you need to have that group of people that you return to it weekly.
Right.
Got it.
Yeah. So if I could have, and in a way, it kind of answers your question as well, because all those games I've played Gloomhaven and Pandemic Legacy and Clank Legacy are just legacy versions of games I already love. So I think that would be my 3, because it's like if I could just imprison 3 other people and go, we're just gonna play games forever until we finish them. I think those would be my 3 choices right now. And coincidentally, there are also games on the top 100 I need to play. So
That's very efficient.
yeah, for me, one thing, if you want to know like how my mind works, it's all about, I love lists. I love completing lists. I love checking off like just I don't know if you're familiar with too much about Jonathan Gold, the food critic.
The food, yeah. He passed away, right?
Yeah, he passed
Yeah.
away several years ago. But another, for example, I have these big, grandiose bucket list goals, which I am very serious about. And his last published list of the 101 restaurants back in 2017.
Yeah.
Every now and then, if people are like, "Hey, where should we go?" I'm like, let me look. Let me see if I can find something. Or like, if my wife and I go on a date night, it's like, "Hey, we should go here." Like, and
that's awesome.
that's also something that has, I'll be frank, pre-pandemic, it was just like, we don't really have time, or I don't know, just blah 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 blah, that sort of thing. But
Yeah.
with once things were safer and people were vaccinated, including ourselves, it became like, I was so sick of being inside, like so sick of, I was telling all my, my friends, like, I was literally making a list of like, we should do this, like, what we've always wanted to do, like escape rooms. Why don't we do them? Or hey, have you ever when's the last time we went mini golfing? Let's go mini golfing. And I made a list. Again, lists. I'm all about lists. So,
I love it.
yeah, and ever since it's been okay to like, go out within reason.
Yeah.
Like, I have been trying to just do as much stuff as possible, and I've been very gung-ho about, let's just, whenever someone says to me, we should do that sometime, I'm like, cool, when? Like, when are you free? Like, let's do it. Like, let's stop being like we should, or and then talk about it for there have been things where we had talked about it for like maybe years, right?
Right.
You know as well as I do that, especially in this town, time can just go.
Oh my
right?
God.
Like you can be like, what? I've been here how long? Right?
Exactly.
And I have not been here that long. Like I've only been here like, 3 years or something. But even then I'm like, where did that go? Like where did that time go?
Yeah.
And it's very easy to just, lose track of time. And so for me, it was like that, and then this sort of thing of like, I want to just take more pictures and memories because I was so depressed that 2020 was just gone. It was just,
right.
I didn't really take a lot of pictures before then, but I was like, soon as I can, let's just do it. Like, let's capture these, let's do shit and capture these memories. And so that's sort of what I've been.
That's so amazing to hear, because that's very inspiring, because I've sort of had not necessarily the opposite response to coming out of it, but it's more like 2019 was a great year for me, but it was also really tough. It was a year where I felt like I was on the verge of burnout several times because it was constantly go out here, go please this group of people, go meet this group of people, go do. And it was fantastic, but it was not a healthy mental way to live. And I feel like the pandemic forced me to sit in one location for an extended period of time. And I ended up processing a lot of the previous year, I think, in that time. And so now coming out of it, hopefully we're not going back into a more a lockdown the way we did in previous times. But like coming out of it in this vaccinated age where it's safe to see people within reason, I'm doing it very carefully in a way that guards my my social capital. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
My battery, because my battery, I find, gets drained more easily being out in the world now than it ever used to. And I think it's temporary. I think I'll probably get back to my zoomy 2019 self again. But I'm also recognizing, it's okay that my world's a little smaller. It's okay that I'm not racing to, but at the same time, hearing you talk about how it's like, we should do this. Yeah, okay, when? Let's do it. Let's set a date. Like, that is so inspiring. And it's given me this shot of like, hey, you know what? That's possible too. So thank you.
I think it's good to strike a balance, right? Because like I have a lot of friends who feel exactly the same way you do, right? Like where like they definitely like it can be draining, like especially even pre-pandemic it might have been draining, and now it's like, oh God, can't even imagine how much worse it is now, right?
Yeah.
I guess for me it was just more of a bottling up. Like I was pretty social before. And I guess for me, it was just, I guess I just like, wow, I really took a lot of stuff for granted.
Yes.
That was my year, was going, wow, I took restaurants for granted.
Right.
I took doing this and that, or just not being in the same place for granted. And so, but I also totally sympathize and understand that, for some people, it was just like, man, like, world's fucked, and I don't necessarily, for some people it's like they just don't feel safe, which I totally understand.
Right. We need like a collective therapy session, I feel. For everyone who took the pandemic seriously, we need like a group therapy session about
what it did. Yeah,
what
pretty
it
much.
did, and like what the world is versus what we thought it was. And I read something on Twitter, somebody had said like, can we retire I'm going to avoid that like the plague, because it's clear that people aren't avoiding the plague. Like retire that saying. And it's just oh yeah, I don't know. But it's all good.
It is this weird, I have this mixed, like, obviously I wish it had not happened, of course, because it was so horrible.
Yes.
But for me, I think I try to, even when it's something really fucking shitty, I try to take something positive out of it. And I'm not like a super optimistic person. I think I tend to verge towards more pessimistic, but I think it's just so from my own, I don't know, selfishness. I'm like, but I need to get something out of this so I can just, progress, right? And I think for me it was like, it's interesting how it sort of changed. I think a lot of people now are just used to like, yeah, you can just, instead of only seeing people in person, you can socialize in other ways. Like there's, Discord became a lot more popular with people,
Right.
or just like, Zoom chats, all that. A lot of that became very normalized.
Yeah.
And like I will admit, there were pre-pandemic. It was this sort of like, I kind of wish I could like, I don't know, shoot the shit like someone like, but it's like, it's like 10 p.m. It's like I'm not gonna call them. Like who calls people, right? But it's something that we're like, oh, Discord, yeah, fuck it, let's just shoot the shit. Or like I also think that there was this sort of group of people that we sort of kind of spent pandemic together, right?
Yes.
Over online,
Right,
right?
right.
And it really, I think, strengthened and progressed a lot of friendships, I think.
100%. 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like look at the people who I spent the most time talking with, texting with, and then when it was safer to see in person. And I look at those friendships and I'm like, I know these people are going to be my friends for the rest of our lives because this is
Right.
too deep of an experience. And like, when a crisis happened, these are the people who have your back, whether
Yeah.
it's physically, emotionally, or, whatever it is. And it really, it's like, of course you wish it had never happened, but it's like a really beautiful mirror to like look
Yeah.
into and see the stuff you want reflected back at you, the stuff that's real, that's true. Also, like so many relationships either fell apart or got stronger.
Yes.
In
It was
this
a big
time.
testing ground for like
Totally.
friendships and relationships.
Oh
for
my
sure.
God.
Yeah. No.
So it's
and
like
it-
if your relationship survived the pandemic, you're probably going to just marry that person if you're not already married to them.
Yeah. Like you managed. Damn. I hope my sort of didn't come across as, oh yeah, like everything's fine, like, and everyone
Oh,
should
no,
be
not at
super
all.
active. I think that was just more my just I'm just riding this sort of wave
No,
of
and
like,
I'm genuinely inspired by that attitude because you're so right. Because like it's that whole like, just can't take anything for granted. Like
Yeah.
the wonder of being able to do the smallest of things that you wouldn't have thought twice about, or the ease it is to, plans don't have to be complicated. Relationships don't have to be complicated. You can just make them
Yeah.
happen. No, I like that a lot.
yeah. Well, I think, yeah, bottom line is we just don't take things for granted. I think that's a good thing to live by anyway.
Yeah. And especially like I feel very privileged to be working in the lane I'm working in because I was going to ask you, did you have any difficulty or was it relatively a process of ease to kind of convert your work all to at home? Like how was that aspect of the pandemic for you?
For me, it was pretty smooth, actually.
That's
just 'cause
great.
I think with I don't know like how much for work from home you were doing prior, but like for a lot of people, including myself, like before we got like into the into the industry, a lot of our voiceover was from home, right? It was like indie games,
Right, right.
and it was just sort of like, oh, I mean, yeah, I've
Doing
done
stuff
this.
from your home setup. Yeah.
Doing stuff from your home setup. Yeah, no, this is how I got started. I this is not new to me. So it was, I think it was just more me. It's like, I think once the industry adjusted to it, because there was definitely
Yes.
this period of like, what do we do? All these companies are like,
Totally.
what? But once people started to get things rolling again, yeah, no, I think I and a lot of people were very lucky, and we were like, no, yeah, we can do this from home. Yeah, I mean,
That's so
it's not,
great.
It's not too crazy of a. How about you?
Yeah, similarly in that it took me a minute to. I had a home setup, but it wasn't great. It was kind of like my
Sure.
rudimentary audition setup.
Yeah,
But I love going out into studios and being with
Me too,
people. And
yeah.
like it's my favorite thing. And so to kind of mentally get into the headspace of you're going to have to do this all from home. You're going to have to make this all work, and you're not necessarily going to get paid an additional fee to get this all set up or to, you know, pay for engineering or editing time. Like that was a bit of a mental adjustment for me to make. But once, and I think collectively the industry too, to make, and our agents, you know, everybody kind of figuring out what the deal was.
Right.
But I'm very grateful and happy that I was able to kind of pivot and get everything set up properly to convert everything to home records. Like within 3 weeks of the lockdown, I kind of had it figured out. And then kept improving from there. And now I kind of have a system where it's very easy. Everything is idiot-proof, Zara-proof. I go in my booth, I turn on my computer, I hit record. I know exactly where everything is. I don't have to worry about it. But it was a bit, even now, you know, now if I have a job where I know I really need to focus on the acting, whether it's a project that has like a lot of efforts or emotional kind of heavy lifting, I will prefer to go into a studio so I just don't have to even think about the tech. But now the tech is pretty second nature to me. To the point where I'm not even worried about it necessarily. The only thing I worry about is if my like downstairs neighbors decide to have a dance party at 2 p.m, which they sometimes do.
Right. Yeah, no, I always prefer to work in the studio if possible, just because, you know, engineers are incredible.
Oh my God bless.
If people
you
didn't
all should
realize
get paid
it,
more.
Exactly. If people didn't realize it pre-pandemic, they definitely realize it now. Like, but you know, I've always, you know, been very thankful to engineers for what they do, and so it's like, I get that, but I also am glad to hear that it was also a relatively smooth transition for you.
And I'm so grateful because so many of my colleagues who only do on camera or theater, it was a rough time for many actors. So I feel very fortunate to be working in this lane of it all.
What we do, well, this has been great. I appreciate you sitting down to talk, and
my pleasure.
I also, you know, whenever I sense that sort of like, this person's a nerd, like, I'm like, okay, that honestly is what interests me. I'm like, what are you passionate about? What are you nerdy about? That's what I like hearing about. Not necessarily. I mean, career is great, and you know, you have of course you've had a fantastic career, but for me, what was honestly, I was like, but she likes Utena, huh?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I want to get her on, but no. And you did not disappoint. This was great.
Oh, I'm so glad. And you're so right. Like when people talk about what they're most interested in, they really come alive. So that's so cool that's what you zero in on is like, what people are fascinated by.
Yeah. Where can people find you?
People can find me on Instagram and Twitter at Zara Fuzzle. That's primarily where I hang out. So you can come say hi there.
All right. Well, again, thank you so much. This has been great.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much. What a pleasure.